Hans, always great to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me back.
You better believe it. The Inspector General testified last week that the Attorney General, Eric Holder, he didn't know, but he should have known about Fast and Furious. And still, Holder insists he was vindicated. Obama says he's standing by his man, saying he's completely confident in the guy. What does that say to you about this whole administration and the way they do business?
Well, it just is amazing to me. I used to work at the Justice Department, and the idea that the president would have confidence in an attorney general who had no idea that his Justice Department was supposedly involved in this major operation, and that his senior leadership, the people who are supposed to know about this, are supposed to keep him briefed, also supposedly didn't know about it, and when they found out about it, didn't bother to tell him about it. I mean, that is just quite an indictment of Holder, his lack of leadership, his lack of judgment, I think.
And you said you used to work for the Assistant Attorney General's office. If you didn't inform him all that you knew about an issue, where would you be?
Oh, I would have been fired.
Yeah.
I mean, my job was to review absolutely everything going on in my particular division and keep my boss apprised of it. And like I said, I would have been fired. Instead, these people have not been disciplined, including one of the main guys, a guy named Grindler, who didn't notify the AG when they discovered that the two weapons at the scene of the murder scene of Agent Brian Terry, when they discovered those were connected to Operation Fast and Furious, not only did he not inform his boss about it, but 2 weeks later, he became the chief of staff for Holder.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch that hearing, you just saw so many members of that committee. They were just baffled that people like Jason Weinstein, who works for Lanny Breuer, the head of the criminal division, he resigns. And as Congressman Gallagher said, somehow, though, Brewer escapes discipline.
Yeah, and that in itself is also a real problem, particularly because, look, this is a very long report. It's almost 500 pages. But one of the things, again, that just astonished me was that 5 of the deputy assistant attorney generals, including folks working for Lanny Breuer, apparently, when wiretap applications came through, they didn't bother to read the supporting documentation, including the agent affidavits that go with it. That is malpractice. They're the ones who are supposed to sign off on whether there's sufficient facts and the legal standards are met for going for a wiretap application. Yet they're not reading the supporting documentation. The documentation, by the way, which made it clear that these weapons were ending up in Mexico, and all of them said, "Oh, well, we didn't read that."
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the report, Hans, what's missing? Do you think? I mean, the committee, they said it was a thorough report, but you got to know the Terry family's got still a lot of questions that haven't been answered.
Yeah, and the biggest question that hasn't been answered in this report is what's in those tens of thousands of documents that the Justice Department has refused to turn over to Congress because they've claimed executive privilege. Now that the IG, by the way, has finished his report, and we know that this operation is over, there's really no reason for those documents not to be turned over.
And he said that they should have been turned over to the Congress. He said the stonewalling that shouldn't have happened. But at the same time, the Inspector General admits that the White House didn't allow him to pursue a lead he really wanted to follow because the administration refused to turn over the internal documents that the president's trying to protect with executive privilege. Now, that in itself says they got something to hide.
No, it does, particularly because, what your listeners may know is that the senior ATF agent in charge, Bill Newell, this is a guy in Arizona who's really running this, he was corresponding by email with a staffer on the National Security Council as the operation was being conducted. And that guy, when his name came out, was suddenly transferred to Iraq, out of Washington.
Kevin O'Reilly, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when the IG tried to talk to him, his lawyer said, well, I can only do it if the White House lets me do it, and the White House would not let him speak to the IG.
And there's all this talk on the committee about reform, that the ATF needs to be reformed, that changes need to be made. Can it really be done when you look at what so many have called a rogue agency for so many years?
I don't know. All of these problems that have been going on, as you say, for so long, no reforms have ever worked cleaning it up. I frankly am not really quite sure why the kind of issues and the kind of cases that the ATF handles, why that couldn't be handled by the FBI.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, what do you think needs to be done as we move forward? They still don't have the documents. They're fighting for them. They say the IG has helped a little bit, and they'll start getting the documents. They're getting some of them. But this fight, like everybody said, it's far from over.
No, it's not. And in fact, the House of Representatives needs to continue forward with the civil lawsuit it has filed over the executive privilege claim in its attempt to force the White House and the Justice Department to turn over these documents.
You know, and Hans, I don't know if you can touch on this, but with the report, is there any legal action the Terry family can take in light of its findings, you think?
I don't know if there's anything in here that will really help them. The one thing it can do is, they've got to, in the lawsuit that they have filed, they've got to show that the people working for the government were not acting in a reasonable manner. They were acting in a reckless manner. And I actually think there's evidence in here of that, particularly the thing I was talking about before. Deputy AGs not bothering to read the supporting documentation and wiretap applications, which would have told them the things being done wrong in this operation. That, to me, is a sign of, like I said, incompetence and potential legal malpractice.
Yeah, negligence for sure. They didn't stop it. They let it keep going.
That's right.
Yeah. And it was interesting, too, because during the course of the hearings, they brought up media matters. And we all know, all about what's going on with them. And they talked about the emails that the Daily Callers obtained that show the Justice Department collaborating with Media Matters to smear and discredit reporters, writers, commentators like you, reporters like me, like Cam. Your reaction when you heard about this?
Well, what's even worse is they were using it to smear their own employees. I mean, that is so unethical and so unprofessional, and I don't think that has ever happened in the history of the Justice Department, that they were basically using this outside media source as their public relations shop for stuff that they didn't want to have their dirty fingerprints on.
Yeah, propaganda machine for sure.
Yes.
And we've already heard from Issa. We were talking to him. He says he's definitely going to launch an investigation into this, looking at the tax-exempt status of Media Matters. And they're determined to get to the bottom of this and move along.
Yeah, but look, this is no surprise.
No kidding.
The person at the Public Affairs Office at DOJ who was doing this was a woman named Tracy Schmaler. I'm sure you remember that she's the woman who was yelling, screaming, and cussing at the CBS reporter who was trying to cover the investigation into Operation Fast and Furious. And have you ever heard of anybody in public relations having that kind of behavior or reacting like that?
No, and then, of course, not only did she do that, but then she gives them story ideas. She pitches Media Matters story ideas and who to go after.
Right.
Like you said, when did we ever see this before? But you really got to wonder if other departments within the Obama administration were doing the same thing.
I think that is in all probability correct. Yes.
Yeah.